Okay, let us start. Welcome, everyone. We have a great presence. We have more than 100 people connected with us today. So welcome to our webinar on National Life Cycle Assessment Database Development, from Guidance to Action. My name is Claudia Giacovelli, and I will be your moderator for this session today. I'm joined by an exciting lineup of speakers and by my UNEP colleague, Laurence, who is also, who should be coming up online very soon. And before we start, I would like to share with you some guidance on how to interact with us today. Your screen should be looking something like this. You will see at the bottom of your screen. I invite you to try it out as I'm showing it to you. There are three buttons, the chat box, the raise hand, and the Q&A. As I was mentioning earlier, if you want to leave general comments, you can use the chat box, but to interact with our panelists, and if you have any questions that you would like us to answer and address during this webinar, please send them through the Q&A. So to do that, you just have to click on the Q&A, which I circled in green, and type your questions and address it to all panelists, and we will try to get to it. We will also, if we are not able to get to to answer all your questions today during the session, we will make sure that we will do that in writing and share the Q&A file afterwards with all of you. If you really can't hold up and wait to write the question, and you really have a burning issue that you would like to raise your hand, and if we have time, I will give you the mic. So just a reminder for everybody, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and copy of the presentation will be shared after the event. Please follow our Lifecycle Initiative Twitter and LinkedIn accounts, where we will post a notice as soon as the material is available and ready for download for you. We'll try to share with you the material within 7 days from this event. So before we start the webinar, we would like to get to know you a little bit better, to understand who is with us today in the room. So I will start a poll to understand who is with us today. What organization do you represent? Are you from government, private sector, a student, academia, etc.? I can see that people are quickly voting, and it's great. I will let it run for a few more seconds. Hopefully all of you can have a chance to vote, and I'll be happy to share the results soon after I close the vote. The poll. So it seems that we have quite a nice spread of representation, with particular presence of academia and research organization, followed by the private sector, which is really great. So I will now end the poll. Thank you so much. And here you can see the results. So now, moving to the next slide, you can see that we have a very busy agenda for today, and that's, as I mentioned, I'm joined by a very exciting set of speakers. We will hear from my colleague Laurence, that will set the context in the light of the Lifecycle Initiative. We will be introduced to the roadmap guidance document that UNEP has published, that basically collates all the recommendations that have been taken from around the world with experiences in developing LCA databases. And we will then hear from the experiences directly from Peru, Brazil, India, and France. We will then also have a panel discussion, and we'll be able finally to introduce to you a new tool that we have developed and is available for whoever is interested in developing LCA databases. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Laurence Milay-Canal, Lifecycle Assessment Team Leader at UNEP. Welcome, Laurence.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for the onboarding explanations and for having gathered everybody here today. I'm sorry that I joined a bit late, but I think hopefully that didn't delay too much the things. So just before we proceed, let me just take a few moments to set the scene. If we move to the next slide, please. And really just before we get on with all the great lineup of speakers that you will have today, just to present the context of where this all sits, which is the Life Cycle Initiative. Hopefully many of you already know it. The Life Cycle Initiative is a multi-stakeholder partnership that was launched in 2002 to enable the global use of life cycle knowledge in informing decision and policy making. The vision of the initiative is that we can contribute to achieving the SDGs and other global goals like the Paris Agreement. We can achieve them faster and more efficiently if we target the key drivers for impact and we address potential trade-offs with life cycle approach. So in order to do this, the Life Cycle Initiative works in the three main areas that you see colored here in your screens. To beginning with the mainstreaming of life cycle thinking into at least 4 global policy areas of decision and policy making. We aim to achieve this before 2022, and we've already surpassed that number. We're also working on life cycle capacity by training, and we have kind of big numbers in terms of wanting to reach decision makers, policy makers, mainly through our e-learning modules that we've been talking about recently. And last but not least, as you see here at the bottom, we have the life cycle knowledge, which is really the basis of everything. All what we do in life cycle assessment, in life cycle thinking, must be rooted in robust life cycle knowledge. If you click once more, please, we will see the life cycle knowledge platform that we're building on, which is essentially a platform to access all the life cycle assessment databases globally in an interoperable way, alongside a library of recommended impact assessment factors, all of these linked through a global nomenclature system. In this platform, we also want to provide the support and also kind of capacity development, but particularly technical support for all of those who are developing national LCA databases with the guidance that we're presenting today and the related technical help desk. So this will be the key focus of today. But before we get there, in this next slide, I also want to use the chance to acknowledge the significant contributions from all of the life cycle initiative funding partners that you see here in the screen. And particularly today, I want to give a special thanks to the European Commission, who have been particularly supportive in all the work done by the Life Cycle Initiative in terms of life cycle data and life cycle capacity development. So this includes obviously the products that are being presented in today's webinar. So with that, I hand it back to you, Claudia. Thank you very much, and I hope you will enjoy the webinar. Cheers.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Laurence. Now I would like to introduce to you Carl Vadembo. Carl is a project manager at the EcoInvent Association, a non-for-profit organization based in Switzerland, and the publisher of EcoInvent database. Carl works at the EcoInvent doing a lot of looking after a lot of outreach and promotion of use and good practice of life cycle assessment worldwide, and is also the lead author for the publication Roadmap for National LCA Database Development, which we are discussing today. So before Carl presents to us, let us watch a short video that shows a bit how did the LCA database guidance document came about.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Claudia. I hope you can now hear and see me okay. With that,
yes, we can hear you and see you well. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. So thank you for the introduction and opportunity to be here and present here today. My name is Carl Wadenbo, and before we get into the database roadmap and the guidance offered in this publication, I would just like to take a minute to share with you how it came to be that we wrote this guidance in the first place. So back in 2014 to 2018, the Economies Association led the LCI component of the Sustainable Recycling Industries Program funded by the Swiss government. And here we were working with 5 focus countries, and the activities resulted in a large number of individuals trained on different LCA-related topics, but also freely accessible data generated mainly by local stakeholders. So at the end of this project, we wanted to use the momentum created and going forward. And luckily enough, the opportunity came for the development of National LCA Databases Roadmap Project. So for this, we teamed up with three of the SRI countries. But the call for proposals here required us to also have a country at the initial or very early stage of LCA maturity on board as well. So we reached out to further countries, and 3 came back so motivated that we couldn't really choose one. And instead, we ended up having 6 countries on 3 different continents in the project, which was great. And yeah, with that sorted out, the consortium members set out to establish roadmaps for developing databases in the respective countries. But that required us to also agree and align on what is really a database roadmap and what does it contain. So you saw this in the video, but in this context, we understand the roadmap to represent the detailed plan to guide collective efforts and actions toward a common goal. And here that's, of course, the successful launch and sustained operation of a national LCA database. Within this project, we strive for a very inclusive process that basically consisted of 3 phases, starting with initiation, stock taking, and an awareness raising for the initiative, followed by conception or design of the database and the dissemination of the roadmap and the action plan. And then finally, the data handling and actual database development. And this was not really the scope of the project, but we still try to provide some inputs for orientation on this part as well. So the standalone publication of the guidance then started preparing this at the end of the project for UNEP. And that document is structured into 6 main sections. And for the guidance, for the publication of the guidance, we elaborated further by adding a 4th section titled Making the Case for LCA, where we focus on the importance of obtaining support from key stakeholders and securing the resources needed for developing a national database. And in the 5th chapter, we address crucial next step to proceed from the roadmap to implementation of for the development of the database. And here we also give some high-level advice on how to manage some common risks. But as a spoiler alert, I must admit that we did not see a global pandemic coming, so that's not part of the guidance here. But maybe that's something done for the next edition of this guidance. The document is aimed at LCA technical leads or experts and practitioners with a solid knowledge of LCA who are involved in initiating, overseeing, and supporting a database development process following the roadmap approach. Listed here are also the main elements of what a database roadmap contains as it's addressed in the guidance. And that range now from organizational structure over resource requirement to data and IT related aspects. And the information in this document is intentionally kept rather broad and general. So throughout the guidance, we strive for neutrality in terms of recommendations for data formats and database system. And instead, we emphasize the need to ensure ease of access, flexibility, and interoperability with other data sources. And throughout the project activities, and also in the time that has passed since this project ended, we've been able to identify some common challenges that somehow prevents the implementation of the roadmaps. And I would like to just run through a few of those here. Resource constraints, obviously, and here securing funding is certainly one very common issue. But I think it's also important to recognize that other resource constraints, be that technical expertise or trust among actors involved, can also be really crucial for the success of the initiative, and those should not be overlooked either. Of course, poor access, availability or access to data for inventory generation can be a real hurdle if that prevents reaching some kind of critical mass of local data to become really relevant for potential users. If there's a lack of awareness for lifecycle thinking or low perceived pressure to adopt lifecycle thinking among key actors, that's also, of course, a huge challenge. And finally, we've seen that shifting political landscapes or the loss of champions for LCA, especially within important government functions, can also be really disruptive to this type of initiative. So this really highlights the need to build a strong case for LCA, to raise awareness, to yield a really robust support for a database initiative. As I think we see that the viability of a national LCA database initiative is so closely linked to the general uptake and practical application of LCA within the country. And finally, some main insights and take-home messages. Key thing, I think, also is that we see that there's so many trade-offs inevitable when developing a national LCA database that we would argue that there's rarely a one-size-fits-all solution here. So again, ensuring consistency, flexibility, data interoperability is really crucial, regardless of the approach chosen for this. And in general, countries looking to develop national LCA databases should probably not underestimate the skills and efforts required to do so. But at the same time, many of the existing databases were starting out with very few full-time personnel, if any, and instead working collaboratively with maybe several organizations chipping in, providing resources and capacities in kind at some lower or moderate level can also be a really successful way. And it's also important to keep in mind here that if there's a value created by the database, then someone should also be motivated to provide the funds for this. And that key user group or industry or sector, or whatever it might be, could then also really be the target initially to make sure that you address the and create value where it's most urgently needed. And that in turn will then lead to new opportunities, hopefully, once lifecycle thinking is adopted more broadly. And finally, in this project, in these activities, we've seen great potential for cross-boundary cooperation. I think you will hear about this also in the presentation coming. And this can, of course, serve as an exchange of knowledge, but it's also a really great source of inspiration. So as a final take-home, I would really urge you to reach out as part of this journey. I think it could really make a difference. I would again just acknowledge UNEP, our contributors and the reviewers involved in this for making this possible. And I leave you with some impressions from the project back in a time where we were not afraid of getting into a group picture. And let's hope we're soon back there again. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Carl. It is indeed great to see pictures when we were not all forced to wear masks and we could actually be next to each other. But it is really good to many good learnings from your experience, and I really like the point that you make in terms of the fact that you reiterate the fact that countries should not underestimate the skills and resources required. But it is indeed encouraging to see that when people, stakeholder groups come together, it is feasible, it is possible to achieve and develop national LCA databases. And this sets perfectly the scenes for the next session, where we have a number of speakers, as I mentioned earlier, from different countries where there has been a successful establishment of these databases and roadmap databases. So let me introduce our speakers. I'll start in order. From Ian Varquez Rowe, is currently an associate professor at the department Ian at the Department of Engineering at the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. Apologies for the pronunciation. And he has participated in numerous research projects and has published over 100 articles in international journals. So Ian brings about a wealth of knowledge on life cycle assessment and great contribution to LCA development in his country and worldwide. We will then hear from Sonyan Karin Chapman, Executive Secretary of the Brazilian Business Network for LCA. Sonia also teaches sustainability and marketing at the International Agribusiness MBA at Audencial School in France and is a juror for Sustainability Awards. After Sonia speaks, we will hear from Rajesh Biniwale. Is Senior Principal Scientist at the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute in India. And he brings a wealth of knowledge in industrial and research experiences, including in the field of environmental project and life cycle analysis. And last but not last, we will also hear from Vincent Colombe. Vincent is an LCA expert and agronomist in charge of the environmental assessment of agriculture and food products at the French Environmental Agency. He has been coordinating for the past 8 years the AgriBalise program, promoting LCA research and implementation at national and international level. So it's a really incredible lineup of speakers. I will leave the floor to Ian to start presenting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia, for your introduction. Perhaps you could stop sharing so that I can share my slides.
I think you can directly share.
Ah, okay, excellent.
Perfect.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your introduction, Claudia, and the pronunciation was pretty good, so don't worry about that. Good morning, afternoon for some people already. I'm going to give just a quick explanation of what we've been doing in Peru for the past decade approximately. So, well, this is something that has already been mentioned now, but there was an important lag between the countries in the global north with respect to countries in Latin America, Africa, Asia, in terms of inventory development for life cycle inventories. Now, this has been identified as a critical issue by the Life Cycle Initiative, also by EcoInvent and other stakeholders within the life cycle assessment world. No? So starting in approximately 2014, we in Peru started some important meetings with the Life Cycle Initiative and with other actors in the region, and we identified the necessity to start this process of developing our own national databases. So something that helped us a lot in this context was that in 2015 we were hosting at my university, at the Catholic University in Lima, we were hosting the SILCA conference, who many of you know is the Ibero-American international conference on life cycle assessment. No? So this was an opportunity to get a whole lot of different stakeholders from the Ministry of the Environment, from different agencies in Peru, together with national, but also very importantly, international actors in the life cycle assessment world. And this kind of started the first vertical spine of what later became our national database. No? So after 2015, we started collaborating, especially with EcoInvent on the one hand through the Sustainable Recycling Industries project, and on the other hand, also thanks to the funding from the IKI project through the United Nations and the Ministry of the Environment in Germany. And this allowed us to do kind of a transversal mapping of the needs that we identified to build our own national database and start tackling certain productive sectors. No? So you can see that, for example, with EcoInvent, we worked with mining, we worked with fisheries, but very importantly, we also worked with capacity. You know, we took different workshops to different stakeholders, to different areas of the country, and we managed to generate awareness within different private sectors of the importance of us developing these national databases. Within the IKI project, what we managed to do was generate inventories for 3 critical sectors in Peru, which were landfills, hydropower, and refineries. And this also generated like the benchmark for us to construct Peru LCA, which in 2019 became our national life cycle assessment database. So well, I've already gone through this. So this is a bit how the project looks like. You know, it's a bit complex. There were other issues going on. We were also focusing on public procurement, on developing an input-output matrix, etc. But for the sake of developing the Peru LCA database, we focus mainly on generating data sets for these 3 critical sectors that I just mentioned, and we built the Peru LCA database based on this. No? A final step was then linking to the GLAD platform, which was something that was done in March this year, just a few months before the official launching of GLAD. So that means that people can already access our datasets, not only through the perulca.com website, but also through the GLAD platform from the Lifecycle Initiative. Well, I've already mentioned the sectors, so I'm going to jump to this slide. First, something very important was to, in this process of building the datasets, we did not have much funding for peer review, for external revisions, etc. So it was important for us to build up information that would allow us also to publish our studies. There's not much current publications on LCA in the Peruvian context, so this was also like a challenge for us, and it also allowed us to understand the perception of blind peer reviewers within the academic context, and allow us to improve and to visibilize our studies. No? This is the main slide of the main website of perulca.com. Currently it's only in Spanish, sorry for that. We'll try and add English as soon as it's possible. And something important here to mention is that it's an independent website. There is a platform that's called the Servicio de Información Ambiental, which is the national service for environmental data, which is a website that depends on the Ministry of the Environment in Peru. But at this stage, it was considered that it would be better to have an independent website through which our research group in the Catholic University could nourish directly the data set as soon as different data sets have been uploaded and included in the website. We also have an input-output matrix. So this allows us to do calculations on environmental impacts, mainly GHG emissions and water footprint for the entire economy. But regarding process-based LCA datasets, we still have only about 5 or 6 sectors represented. So landfills, wastewater, hydropower, fishing, aquaculture, a bit of agriculture, and roads. But we are trying to generate an incremental perspective. No? Now, here you can see a bit the layout. And I know I'm a bit out of time, but what I wanted to mention also is that currently the way the web page is designed, when you want to download the datasets, you can only download them as EcoSPOL formats. Now we want to change this. We want to continue with EcoSPOL, but we also want to show the information in Excel and PDFs in order to provide more information to a wider range of people. A second issue is that right now Peru LCA as a database works mainly as a repository, and we want to generate an interoperability. We want to make this more useful for local LCA practitioners, and that's something we are currently looking at with EcoInvent. Sorry, Carl, I haven't answered your latest mail for a couple of weeks. But we're already working with that with the team in EcoInvent, and we hope that perhaps in the next months or couple of years we can provide a more articulate and useful database that will provide information and interoperability for a wider public. And that's all I had to say for now. So I don't have much time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions later on.
Brilliant. Thank you so much here. That is very informative and very, very clear. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And as Sonia prepares to share a screen, let me say that there were a lot of questions that were coming through in the Q&A box, but we will answer those. We will take up those in the panel discussion. So be prepared to answer. If you want to actually have a look at them while the others are speaking, you may also do that. Okay, Karin Chapman from the Brazilian Business Network from LCA. Thank you, Sonia.
Hi, Claudia. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation, for the opportunity of sharing with you our main project and contribution to society as Rede ACV. Rede ACV has been created right after Rio +20, very much inspired by the Life Cycle Initiative itself. We are a member since last year, and we are also strategic partners of LCA and of course with EcoInvent. Thank you so much, Carl, Emilia, Pipa, everybody for this opportunity. We will talk specifically about the Cornerstone Project and the challenges we faced and how we are still overcoming them. But I thought maybe a minute or two introducing Rede ACV. It's a Portuguese name, of course, for Brazilian business network. And here are the main goals. It's most important of all, it was supposed to be an environment for businesses to exchange experience in running LCAs, in communicating them afterwards or not. What were the challenges they were facing back then in 2013? So in the end, it's really an environment for cooperation among companies, but among all players. I will show you in a minute who is associate. Of course, by that, we aim to optimize the allocation of resources, be it money or time and expectations, of course. We also want to address the need to educate and offer capacity building opportunities for companies and for society in general about lifecycle thinking and LCA, of course, and the benefits of it. We also might make available and disseminate information about LCA and cases. In the end, I will show you the web page, which is also in English, so you will find a lot of information there. And most important of all, the main contribution is to collaborate and to support Brazilian government in the consolidation of life cycle inventories database, which, as in Peru, were not representative for Brazilian realities until now. These are our 30 members, associates. We have, being a business network, of course, mainly businesses, companies, Brazilian, multinational, small, medium, big. So the nice thing about Rede ACV is that we are really diverse in the contributions and its composition. But we also have academia, NGOs, and the Brazilian government sharing their views, very often the critical views of what has to be improved in LCA and in other items which we address. How we work: we have every 2 months a bigger meeting with all associates, and we also have been inviting important stakeholders there to discuss how LCA and lifecycle thinking can be broader addressed by society. So we had a meeting with the representative in Brazil of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to discuss how complementary life cycle thinking and assessment is with circular economy, for instance. And we had also colleagues from CIREG and World Business Council discussing World Business Council Factor 10 initiative, for instance. Pre-sustainability was talking to us about a global perspective of LCA. So we always, every 2 months, we discuss some strategic opportunity to enhance the visibility of LCA and LCT in society. And we also have working groups, like I said, capacity building, very important. How to communicate results and the concept itself. Brazilian database, of course, which will be highlighted here in this project. We discussed the role of labeling, which is very much connected to the role or the challenge of communicating LCT and LCA. Circular economy, and also more recently, we launched the Sustainable Development Goals working group, which is aligned with the initiative of pre-sustainability with Lifecycle Initiative to connect the SDGs to LCT and LCA. And then we have a very technical commission also, which is led by KPMG, and a more transversal approach of all the working groups, but specifically for construction, agro, and finance. So today we will talk about the Cornerstone Project, which is the most important project of the Brazilian database working group. This working group is led by Embrapa, who already has been contributing here, as shown by earlier, to the lineup and construction of GLAD and local databases in Brazil, and to discussion of the importance of having integrated databases worldwide. And SAV Brazil is a consulting company, our associate and council member, and they are executing, they are calculating the Cornerstone Project, where I will have the honor now to talk about. But Tiago is here with me and also available for the Q&A session if you have more detailed and technical questions. So the Cornerstone Project's goal is to increase the quantity and, of course, the quality of the Brazilian datasets in EcoInvent database through 2 steps, which I will describe very quickly. First is a recontextualization, and then the second step is the reconnection of EcoInvent datasets. So, of course, provided that these recontextualized datasets are compliant with the EcoInvent and Brazilian data collection guidelines and database demands, they will be available in both EcoInvent and Brazilian SICV database, so that they will be available for everybody. The Cornerstone Project is inspired by the Quebec Lifecycle Inventory Database Project, which was developed by CIREG and in partnership with ecoinvent. So what we did, we first had to understand what were the main datasets group, which were the main dataset groups, which were really representative and specific for Brazilian reality, either because they're in the base of the economy or because Brazil is really has specificities about it, and they don't show Brazilian reality as well in the ecoinvent database. So if you see here the 5 darker blue data sets, they were the ones we in the first step had to recontextualize, which means we had to collect national data for them. And the second step, where we had the effort to reconnect many data sets because they are influenced by data which is very specific for Brazil. So here are the 5 recontextualized data sets we've identified, and I will go really quickly through each, but the presentation is available afterwards, and of course we are also available for further questions and details. I think the main outcome of this opportunity today is to be connected to all of you so that we can continue sharing experience after this event.
Indeed, Sonia, thank you so much. If just a reminder of the time, we have a few minutes more for the presentation.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. So in the end, we had to recontextualize 30 data sets. Very quickly, the freight transport had to be recontextualized because we have the load factor, which is higher in Brazil than in the ecoinvent database. The full composition has 12% of biofuel, so it also had to be adjusted, and the emissions due to that are different as well. In petroleum and gas, we also had to adjust and check, even with Petrobras, main player here in Brazil, of course, if our calculations were similar to their own data. Here to show that we really made a huge effort to have it all very transparent and calculated in detail, and also available for everybody to check and see if they are comfortable with that. And for biodiesel, we also had to do some adjustments, and because of the mix of soybean oil in the oil share in Brazil. In diesel, we understood that the information in ecoinvent is adequate. It really represents Brazilian reality. We only had to really check due to the distances of some 5,000 cities we have in Brazil, and the huge size of the country, of course, if the logistics of it was all right, and that we had to cross-check with the Brazilian National Agency too, and they were very supportive, and that was a very, very nice outcome of this project. So now the second step was to reconnect data sets. So the first step was to understand which ones were significantly influenced by electricity, diesel, petroleum, natural gas, and transport. Like I just said, the first step was recontextualizing those. And that meant that we had to run more than 100,000 calculations. The second filter was to understand the number of times the dataset is connected to other datasets in the database. The more connected, the more relevant that was. And of course, the third filter was the technology correlation with the ones used in ecoinvent reference countries. So was it really specific for Brazil? And that was the third filter. So the a very nice overview is that for more than 20,000 data sets. We came up with 185, which were really relevant and will be then fed in the database and will represent a better reality for Brazil. And so what are the next steps? The Cornerstone will now be, is already been calculated, will be shared with economies colleagues next week, whether they agree with that, and it will then in the next phase move on to have data from industry replacing, updating, or enhancing the information we already are submitting. So maybe one final word on the challenges. These were the challenges on the technical side, of course, but then we had the challenge to fund the project too, and to have the buy-in of other stakeholders like Petrobras, like I said, and also the Brazilian national agency, so that they are really comfortable with the data we are calculating, we're coming up. So happy to hear from you the questions and to be connected afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonia. This is really, really interesting to hear, and really gives us another point of view compared to also the Peruvian experience, in the sense that it really makes us understand how the challenges or the process you had to go through to really make global data sets more custom made and more relevant for your local national context. And I would ask in the meantime Rajesh Biniwale to share his screen for his presentation. And thank you again, Sonia. And the point I wanted to make is really how important regional representative data are to be able to really assess the local context and provide LCA-based decision recommendation for policy decision making and for business decision making as well. So thank you for that insightful presentation, Sonia. Rajesh, let us know if you are having trouble sharing your screen.
I think my
perfect.
screen is
We
okay.
can see it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see and hear you. Very fine. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm talking about whatever our experiences on the LCA, and then further down the line, the need of roadmap for Indian LCA database, which we have created, and then further down the line, the LCA data per se itself. And difficult challenges also I will explain. What are the challenges which we are having, and what are the solutions which we are proposing to remove those challenges. I hope my slides will move. Yeah. The first thing is, why do we need a national LCA database? Because we have a lot of things under kind of developing stages into industrial sectors as well. And there are four key triggers which I would like to emphasize on, which are greening of the global markets, the pressure from trading partners. This was rather it's quite a pressing issue from quite some time, for decades now, because the first LCA in India was the steel sector, which was in 1999 around, and which was because Indian steel was not able to sold in the market due to its carbon footprint, which was very high. And therefore, the first LCA was done for the global markets perspective, and this is a continual trigger which is currently existing. The public health, which is the problems which are attributed to the pollution and the waste management. Everybody of us must have been listening news from Delhi and similarly other places. And we have those issues to be sorted out, and the government has taken this as a priority agenda for removing these pollutions, and particularly looking at the waste management. Resource efficiency increase and the self-reliance. Self-reliance is one of the big objective which we want to achieve in India, and therefore to increase the domestic production and the consumption, sustainable consumption basically. This is what we are looking at. So I'll say what we are talking about is, while doing all these things, are we, while doing the pollution reduction or trying to make resource efficiency improvements, are we changing the burden from one or shifting the burden from one place to another. So to avoid that, we want to understand the LCA studies, and therefore the LCA data is important to us. Which the end of the project which we have done is a roadmap document, is to show the direction of making high quality, reliable, consistent availability of the data and the community for ongoing impact assessments. So this is what the objective which we had while preparing the roadmap document. It is a continual process. We will continue to add the values to it. Next is what is that strategies and approach for developing national database. We would like to understand it in the two ways. One is a standalone database which can be used by anybody, or there are could be possible integrations with the LCA softwares, either in open public domain or maybe with some kind of subscriptions. And these softwares should be able to fetch out the data very easily from this database, and it could be connected to the kind of database like a GLAD database, so that there is a lot of issues here. The issues are related to the data mining itself, data obtaining itself, till the data's format which would be required to. So what we thought that the first step or practical exercise if you want to do is to end-to-end process of collecting new data. See, a lot of data which still being used in India for LCA studies is majorly sourced from somewhere else. So we will have to develop some prototypes of the database, and then also use them into various LCA softwares to generate LCA studies around certain prototypes, and that's the way we are looking at it. Of course, we will need the funding, and the funding is a difficult scenario everywhere, and same as in India. However, we have certain advantages of being myself being in the government organization, and the organization itself has that is set up. We are trying a prototype development through NIRI's internal resources at the beginning, and then trying to connect with another ministries such as Ministry of Environment and Forest and other ministries which could be also be interested in giving us the funds related to LCA of their sectors, and therefore the database can be generated. And there are some other organizations which are existing, which are ready to contribute to it. These are basically from industries, because they have to write a sustainability reports for them, and therefore it is important to them to also submit the data. Sometimes they are hesitant to give the data. This reason being they might think that this data may be used against them if that data is revealing certain things like the pollution. I will be speaking on very few prototype things, one or two, and then the proposed prototypes, and then I will finish my presentation. So the prototype development of the current status for one is like we have done for a captive power plant of 25 megawatt, which is a software was open source software with the EcoInvent data as the background data set. And we have collected this data, and then we have done a primary LCA on this to support this industry to take a decision during their environmental clearance methodology. And what indicative data I've just shown here is the amount of energy which is at the different stage of production. And this energy coming from electricity, hard coal, and basically coming from electricity, which is actually using coal as a source of fuel. And this is at the different stages: raw material production, then again to production and boiler section, production and the demineralization section. So these kind of data sets which are getting generated. In a presentation, I cannot include a lot of data, but this is the indicative data which we are generating from the primary things as well. So some of the data was taken from the EcoInvent, but some of the indicative data which I'm showing here was taken from the primary things. Another study which we have completed and which is published also is a LCA of liquid organic hydrides to transport hydrogen. This is a concept for transporting hydrogen in a safer way and at ambient temperature and pressure, so that you don't require a lot of cost to transport hydrogen and maintain the purity of hydrogen. So the goal of this was to compare it with the transportation of LOH hydrogen versus gaseous hydrogen and the liquid hydrogen transport. How could it be look like? What is happening? Because gaseous is more towards the hydrogen economy for the fuel vehicles, whereas the liquid is more in the space research. So to comparing with the both, LOH has shown quite a good advantage when particular number of miles are more than the amount of distance to be traveled is more than 195 miles. This was a precise number which we could generate. So this is a kind of a LCA tool which we are using to impress upon and to also kind of analyze and put forward that this kind of hydrogen transportation method would be environmentally benign and useful for a long distance transport of hydrogen. Some more prototypes and discussions with various sectors, and which we will be taking up because we are also writing some proposals on this, and it has to be funded by some agencies, so taking some time. But this is like a second LC of steel sector. I'm saying second because the first LC was done in 1999. We have to do it again. Then the aluminum industry is interested to look at LCA approach for aluminum industry. There's a big project in India taken by UNDP where the plastic collections and recycle and its management is being taken care of. So a number of stations are generating, and they are a very good source of generating the data on the current plastic collection and its management. One of our lab is also working on the biojet fuel, and we are trying to make data out of it, and again LCA study to publish so that we connect the data on the biojet fuel, particularly looking at the alternative fuel technologies. And the wastewater treatment technologies, there is a lot of need in India for understanding which technologies will be more suitable for the wastewater treatment under a lot of programs which are targeting treatment of wastewater from domestic and industrial sector. Last one slide, basically. The challenges which we are facing is one is during the prototype development is we are facing a difficult, we have a domain experts, but then when it comes to the data and its connectivity to the software, which we need a lot of technical expertise, which we are finding difficult. And we need to get some support from software vendors also, because how do they fetch out the data, what kind of data formats, and then the retrievability they need, that we need to understand to them. Some of the difficulties we resolved at our own level because we have a servers and other thing to host the data, so that we have done. One more thing which I should also mention is in this current situation, everything is moving towards controlling the pandemic and controlling the COVID-19 virus. Rest of the things are very limited, so the funding has been also diverted to a large extent. So in the prototype development, we are facing currently these issues. But the eventual solutions, there are a number of organizations, as I said, they are interested in, and they are looking also not only for making the studies, but also to support the database management as well. And then one more aspect is, although we are in the government sector, but when we say this data, what we tried to do was we had constituted a committee or a group, management group, which will be looking at the national level database management group, drawing experts and officials from various different organizations, government organizations. So to make it more like a formal group, which would be looking at this. But then again, some ministry has to hold this and making it forward. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajesh. And it is true, the funding, as we heard it already also from Ian and Sonia and from Carl, funding is always a challenging point, and especially now with the COVID, it poses additional strain. So, but thank you so much for your presentation. And as I was mentioning to the others as well, there are questions coming through in the Q&A, so you are most welcome to, if you have time, to look at those and provide some answers already. Otherwise, we will take up the questions also in the panel session. As I'm the last speaker, before we move to the panel session, actually, we move to France, and I would like to invite Vincent Colombe from ADEME to share his screen and share with us his experience. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you, Claudia, and it's a pleasure to be with you today to share our experience about managing a national database. It's a bit more specific. Let's get full screen. Okay. It's a national database, which is a bit more specific compared to the other ones that we've seen, as it's focused on agriculture and food. And it's also a bit different, as I think it's kind of old database compared to the other experience, as we have already 10 years. And so we have been facing all the challenges that have been discussed, and I will be able to provide you a bit of feedbacks on how we went on the way. Very quick about the database itself. It's today about 1,000 agricultural products with conventional agriculture, like a French representative of the French production. But we also have some organic production with some quality levels and different kind of agricultural system, where we try to highlight the environmental benefits of different farming techniques. Also, we have 2,500 food products. So there we go from farm to fork, and where we have products that are representing average market product on the market. So we don't have a brand or label. It's just like the average bread that is sold in France. We include the importation at the food level. We are aligned with the national nutritional database, which is a very interesting, so people can combine environmental and nutritional data. And we also provide a lot of metadata on quality of the data and all the information to help the users. Building such a database is first a question of time. So we reach here in 2020. It's been more than 10 years that the program is ongoing. We started first in 2009. We started, I'm sorry, already?
This is the beauties of COVID and remote and home working. So as we go live, anything can happen. But it is great to see how we handle these life work experiences. Thank you, Vincent.
I'm back. I'm very sorry. It's a problem with home working.
I was just saying that.
I'm back with you. I was saying, yeah, so that's been 10 years. We've been working on this project. We started from the agricultural level, where we were very focusing, because it was one of the key questions for the sustainability. We knew it was a lot about what's happening at the farm level. And so we developed first the first bunch of data, about 200 data at the agricultural level. Then we enriched the database. We put some more about the food processing processes. And that's how we reached in 2020 this version AgriBase 3.0 with the data from cradle to fork, and a new design, and also a new communication scheme, which is also important on the database management side. A national database is a big question of expertise. We have been working in a very collaborative approach with two main leaders for the database, which are ADEM, so my agency, and the INRAE, which is a research agency for food and agriculture in France. So it's a big institute, and we have been from the beginning leading the program. But in addition to our expertise, there's been a contribution for technical institutes, companies, consultancies. We've been also working with other European teams. And so it's been about more than 100 people who have been contributing to the database in different ways. Well, of course, we've been all mentioning this. The key is also to find a suitable business model. The first question is, who are your users? I think an interesting point here is that this is evolving in time. First, it was, in our case, it was really mainly LCA experts that were using our work. And it's now being opening a lot to all the food professional and a much broader audience. And then the other question is who is willing to pay, but not only with money, it's also can be, we had a lot of more expertise contribution, which is also very important and contribute to the success of the program. So the main target in our case are the policymakers. We have a strong support from the ministry from the beginning, and the food companies. And we have what we call co-benefiters, which are NGOs, the education, all digital players also that are using our data. Based on this, we have a business model that says that is a mix of public and private money. And we are more on the major donors rather than trying to get a lot of small fundings, which is also quite time demanding. Sometimes it's the best way or the only way, but if you can rely on less and with less number of people with larger amounts, it's more comfortable. What I would really recommend if you're thinking about starting a database is to enjoy the beginning of the honeymoon. Of course, it's not so easy. You need to secure the funding. But once you have this, you have some, let's say 1 to 3 years when you can work peacefully to start to get your data and do the technical work that is required in a peaceful way. Then when you start with the release, it's a new challenge. So you need there to make sure that some people are benefiting really from your work and they want you to continue and they can support you. Then you have some more years when you have more demand from your users, but you still are somehow peaceful. And then you should really keep working on improving the data and the communication. And then that's where we are now. We're really becoming kind of mainstream tool. And it's a very interesting time. You get a lot of light. You get a lot of demand from the companies, from the press, from lots of people who get interest in your work. But you also get a lot of questions and some people not always happy with the LCA results they get, which is also something you need to manage. So I try to make a never forget list when you're managing a database. The first point I wanted to really indicate is that it's really key to have a small group of people that are really involved, that are skilled and passionate. It doesn't need to be a lot of them. I think it's 3 to 5%, but you can rely on them for at least 2 to 3 years, and you can develop the technical content. You need to define clearly what you are. Are you only a LCA database, or also you're a group of experts that can give some recommendation to companies and some kind of consultancy? Do you want to provide a tool to use the data beyond only the database? So this is important to define your scope. What you need to always keep in mind is about the future, your updating capacity. If someone is providing you data that you will not be able to update, it's useless. I really think you should always have a dynamic view on your work. There are some very key decisions. For example, when we started, we were thinking whether we should rely on ILCD or EcoInvent database as background. And we thought we had more guarantee with EcoInvent, which resulted to be true as ILCD now is stopped. And this is, I think, a big problem for the databases that are used on ILCD on background. So it's always possible to change, but it's much more complicated. But this is really some kind of key decision that you have to keep in mind. I mentioned it, no one likes bad mark. So we have having some strong opposition about we can mention the livestock sectors where LCA shows that it has more environmental impact. So some of them are trying to stop our work, but we have enough support to go on, but it's a reality. And we always try to provide science-based answers. And this is really important also, is to know for yourself and for the others that you're not alone. You are evolving in a network, in international context of LCA database. And so it's also what we're telling to people who are not happy. Say, you're not happy, but the other publications, the other databases say the same basically as we are saying. And even if we would stop our work, this would not change the problem. There will be other with less good data. We will go on saying the similar thing. So try to help us, be constructive, but it's not, there is no option to stop that. And really the LCA list and the LCA network is wonderful, and I've been helped many times with any kind of questions, and it's a luck to be able to cooperate at the global level. And thanks also to networks such as GLAD and UNEP. So this is really important. And finally, make sure that you're not only talking to LCA people, that you keep simple words to explain your work. I get to my last slide. So is it worth to make a national database after 10 years? It's definitely worth it. We released our new version in end of September. There was more than 800 people connected from the food sector, NGOs, government, and a lot of diversity. It's about 85% of them say this, they were very interested about the work we show. We had 8,000 visits on our webpage since October, more than 1,000 downloads of the database. It's on Excel file, as well as in CIMAPRO. The data is already included in many tools that are helping restaurant, farming cooperative, food companies. So it's really used more and more. And now it's also a strong basis for environmental labeling. At the national scale, we are trying to develop an eco-labeling scheme that would apply to all the food products. And Agribialis is the key basis for that. So we are really happy and in mind to start new cooperation also at a more international level right now. So if you're interested in developing food national database, please contact us. We'll be really glad to discuss it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ian. Vincent, sorry. This was super interesting. And after 10 years, you say it with such an energetic smile that, yes, it is definitely worth it to start a national LCA database. And even if the honeymoon phase, as you call it, is finished some time ago, and now you are living the thunders and fire. So that's really great. And I really like the point that you make in terms of having a dynamic view, making sure that as you build the database, you also incorporate in there directly the need for constant updates to make sure that the database remains relevant. Now, we are running a bit late, but it's great to see that people are still with us. We still have a great presence, and please stick around. We are going to move to the panel discussion now, where you will have the chance to ask direct questions to all our panelists. So I would like to invite all of you to put on your cameras if you can. And after the panel, I will present to you and launch a new tool that we developed. So it would be great, even if we run a bit over time, it would be great if you could be with us. For the panel discussion, I would like to introduce, you have heard from all the speakers, but I would like to introduce to you Pippa Notten. Pippa is the director at TGA's ThinkSpace in South Africa, and an expert in LCA as well. And I hand it over to Pippa to moderate this part.
Thanks, Claudia, and hello, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us this long and all the great questions coming up in the Q&A. So we'll try and get through some of those now quickly, as we've only got about 10 minutes. I've just seen a really nice one that I think probably applies to everybody on the panel. So I think I'll start maybe with, I think it came at the end, so to you, Vincent. But it says, so what is the main driver to build a national database? Is it is it political will? And then, so what's the first step before involving institutions and companies? So, well, maybe if we go through everybody one by one, what was the main driver behind developing your database, a national database? So, Vincent?
On our side, I would say two main drivers. One was the political willingness to go for eco-labeling scheme on the short term, And well, it was at the origin 10 years ago, so it's really getting into reality only now after 10 years. So the politics, they did not really realize all the technical challenges behind it, but that was the initial aim. And also this, that we were really convinced that we need to connect better the consumption and the production patterns. And LCA is a key tool for that. And that was really a strong conviction from our agency and all the partners that contribute to the program.
Would anybody else on the panel want to comment about if political will is the main driver for a database, or do you see another one? Perhaps Brazil, it's been around so long, and you with the very industry focus. Well, what is the driver for the Brazilian national database?
What I just described, the Cornerstone Project, is the initiative from companies. The Brazilian government's will, and here Tiago Rodrigues is also participating. He is probably best to describe the origin of that program, but the Brazilian government had already this national database structured and intended 10 years ago or something. The problem we saw, and that was the contribution now with this project, is that we needed to make sure that also companies are engaging and contributing with their own local data. So the structure was there, the political will was there, but we did not have enough contributions from data sets to fill the structure. So what we are doing at Rede, Braskem and Brapa, they were already submitting data sets, and also IPT, Fernanda is here participating with cement products 2 years ago. We are all making sure that the database has a content. And we also want to address that for every life cycle study run in Brazil, we have to first adapt a lot of things because there is no primary data yet for transportation and so on I just described. So we want to make this Cornerstone Project a way to have better data. That's why we also talk to Petrobras and other companies who are not yet sharing their primary data. But next year, we already want to go into phase 2 and substitute these calculations we just did with all the necessary commitment to really representative data, substitute them by primary data. So all associates at Rede ACV know that they are there because at some stage we will ask them to contribute with their own data. Of course, in an anonymous way, and everything IPT and Fernanda is here participating did for the cement industry, but we want to make the next phase, next year is already into that, in this direction.
Thank you. I think somewhat similar, actually, and I've seen this is a question that's come up more than once this afternoon. I think I'm going to address it first to you, Ian, because I saw you already wrote a reply to one attendee, but I see it's come up again, is how do you engage industry to give you the data? So obviously you have this political will and you get going on your database, but you really need to have your local industry or sectors able to give you data. So how do you go about engaging industry and getting them to give the data that they may well not want to give you?
Thanks, Pippa. Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's quite tricky also, no? So in our experience, when we were working on dataset development in the period 2016-2019, something that worked very well for us was starting with awareness workshops to the different sectors, no? So if we wanted to work with landfills or if we wanted to work with agriculture, we would set up a workshop, perhaps a one-day workshop. We would invite stakeholders from the sector, and we would set up a workshop in which we were aiming at engaging them, no? And making them understand what we are trying to do, how we want to do it, and also making sure that they understand that sharing this data does not necessarily mean that they're going to get in trouble with local environmental authorities. authorities, which is usually the main setback. No? And this worked very well with us. We managed through this scheme, we managed to always guarantee at least a small number of companies that would work with us. No? Now, we've got a project of similar characteristics now that we started developing 3 or 4 months ago. And we've done the workshops online. And we haven't managed to get that same level of involvement, and we are struggling with respect to the face-to-face workshops. So I suspect that the going online is probably reducing like the level of engagement between us and certain companies. But yeah, that would be my main recommendation.
Thanks, Ian. Anybody want to add to that about engaging industry? Okay.
Maybe just mention again the cement effort IPT did in Brazil for the Swiss government. They had this chart showing how the data for the cement industry was prior to the project and afterwards with the primary data of the industry, and that is very convincing too. For industry to engage in contributing with their own data.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's a method we've used, yeah, in South Africa. A question for you, Rajesh, I think, is that there was a question about how do you actually go about prioritizing what data to collect for your database? So you're at the early stages, but sort of like, well, certainly like Brazil and India are both really large countries and quite diverse economies. How do you go about, or do you have a method to go and select which data you will, or data sets or sectors you will be going after in your database?
So we have already initiated certain things at national level, which are the resource efficiency documents which we have created for certain sectors. One is steel, another is aluminium, third is e-waste, and then the fourth one is the petroleum industry. And these are the industries which are contributing in a large way to the GDP, and this industry will see the growth, a very fast growth into the future as well. So the focus has been put on the industries which are having the fast growth rate and the contribution to the GDP is a large extent. Also, these industries these sectors are important to us in terms of global markets. And therefore, these are the major contributor to the development. And therefore, we have selected these sectors. Now, within these sectors, there could be priorities which could be of a discussion, which one is first and which one is second. But I would consider these are the group which is in the first priority. And then comes a few more things which are actually contributing is to the large extent to GDP of India is the agricultural sector. But the agricultural sector is quite unorganized and the very small farmers are doing the agriculture over here. And therefore, the database collection in the agriculture is rather difficult, except at a certain level. You have some data at the local urban bodies of what kind of crops and everything. But if you look at the kind of fertilizer usage or the kind of pesticide usage, this data is not certainly available with a kind of validated or a quality controlled data is not available. So that's a challenge, but that we need to resolve. So our priorities will be set like this. This is what I would explain from Indian perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Claudia, I think if we want to leave it there, it is getting towards the end of our time. But I just refer everybody to the written answers and also that we will share these Q&A answers. And I thank the panelists very much for filling in the written answers. And if they can carry on to do that so we can actually circulate all those answers.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And it's super interesting to hear the more details on how you've prioritized or how to engage stakeholders. And the good thing is that what I will go ahead and now explain is the fact that so there is a tool that we have prepared and we will, so it's the LCA database help desk. This has been developed with the financial contribution of the European Commission. The pages have been implemented by Pre Sustainability. And what the reason why I wanted to show it to you today is really because it's a guide that somehow try to handhold whoever feels that wants to embark in the development of a national LCA database. In fact, this approach can also apply to a sector database, and it really reflects step by steps. It unpacks step by steps what has been included in the roadmap guidance that we were talking about at the very beginning. So just quickly, if I take you through so you can first of all access the help desk by searching helpdesk.lifecycleinitiative.org. The interface will look pretty much like this, and you will see here that there are 5 main steps to develop a database. So from initiation to conception, development, distribution, and operationalization. And it will give you, if you then go on to the different tabs, it will really unpack step by step and provide additional resources. So the text that you see bolded here will really connect you to further details. And eventually, here also in the development session, for example, one big tip is to connect and engage with experts. And to do that, in fact, you will be directed to the Lifecycle Initiative group page. So if you request to join on this page, you will be able then to start a conversation and access the expertise and connect with experts in the LCA field. As you can see, we have 2,900 members. So your question can really be answered by the expertise out there. So you are not alone in this effort. And that's also why I wanted to say that all the panel members are also, I invite basically everybody to interact and provide support on this page. Finally, moving to the distribution and operationalization page, this is what you will find. And we have a resource page where you will be able to, again, engage with experts. We have an expert directory. We have lots of training resources. We have frequently asked questions, and we will continue including and incorporating on this site all the resources, new resources that will be developed. So if you also have interesting resources or experiences that you would like to share with us and share with the rest of the world, in fact, we'll be able to receive, and we will assess and possibly upload it here as well. So here is a tool that really is for you, the LCA database help desk. Please make use of it, and we stand ready to provide support as much as we can. And with that, I want to thank all of you for attending, and a particular very, very big thank to all our panelists and speakers for today for the brilliant and insightful information. Thank you so much for staying with us, and all the very best. Stay safe. Bye.